Okay, I will call the Joint Review Board meeting to order on October 5th at 6:30 p.m. We will do a roll call. And let's see. Lori Gregg,
Here.
Jack Heineman, not present. Kristen Runge,
Here.
Adam Gallagher,
Here.
Jim Elvacrogue.
Here.
And we need to take appointment for the public member. So I would take a motion to appoint a public member for the board.
Which is Jim.
Is it
Yeah.
okay?
I
Sure.
nominate Jim.
Okay, I'll second that then.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so now we have a public member and now we will nominate a chairperson. I would take a motion for a chair.
I nominate Kristen.
I'll second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Great, the motion carries.
Thank you very much, Carla. On to the first item on the agenda, Tax Incremental District Number 9, review the responsibilities of the Joint Review Board. And that goes to, I believe, Todd or Tim.
Yeah, thank you.
I can take that. So we put this on the agenda just to remind the board what the responsibilities are, but we just went through this in the last couple of months. So I know you're all well aware of that, but at the end of the day, your job is to determine whether or not the project plan and the district as it's being proposed ultimately meets the but-for test. So with your permission, we can move into a brief presentation that we've prepared to kind of cover the highlights of that plan. And while Tim's bringing up those slides, I would just note that this is intended to go to the Community Development Authority next week, Wednesday. I know there have been and will be additional discussions with the parties that are involved. Normally, when we give you the project plan, it generally doesn't change much. In this case, there is some potential we may make some additional modifications prior to the public hearing. If we do, we'll certainly send you an updated copy with a summary of the changes. But big picture, we do not expect the boundaries to change the overall projects. It might be just some of the aspects of how the deal terms are put together, and would also note that there is no draft development agreement at this point. So this is strictly a cash flow exercise pending that development of an agreement. I need to put this in presentation mode, Tim. The down arrow. Okay. I see. So we'll start with the proposed boundary. This area should look very familiar. This is where we just executed the TID9 territory amendment, where we added this parcel to that district. Oops. Oh, south. Yeah, that's right. Also, for reference, the blue boundary, as a reminder, is the existing TID number 3, which we'll cover during the annual report part of the meeting, but TID 3 is effectively done at this point. So this would allow for incorporation of more or less the generally undeveloped areas in the north side of the business park along the south side of State Highway 19. This would be designated as a mixed use district. So all of the parcels within the district are suitable for either industrial or commercial development. So we meet that minimum threshold of 50% as a mixed use district. This has a maximum life of 20 years. This is primarily a public infrastructure TID. And I will just skip to the next slide because that will show the detail as to what those improvements are. So the first project would be the extension of Frank H. Street from Hogan to the west to connect to the existing stub of Frank H. Not only the street improvements, but there is also sanitary sewer, water, stormwater management, basically all the items that you see on the legend. And then also intersection improvements associated with the Frank H extension on Hogan, and then also unrelated to the private development portion of the project, there is ultimately the plan for intersection improvements at Hogan and State Highway 19. Within that recent amendment, we did include a placeholder for that district to potentially contribute some funds. So similarly, to the extent that there's benefit accrued by this district as a result of those improvements, we've included a projection of funds potentially available to offset some or all of that cost. In terms of what those numbers look like, so and kind of getting into at least at present how this is envisioned to be financed. So the extension of Frank H primarily affects two landowners, MLG and Stotts. And the sums you see here, the 2.8 million and then the 2.2 million collectively, that is the engineer's estimate for all of the work that was shown on that other map. So again, that's the street, that's the various utilities, the stormwater management. It would be anticipated that this would be financed by the landowners, who would then be reimbursed on a pay-as-you-go basis. So we see estimated interest associated with both of the municipal revenue obligations or pay-as-you-go bonds. The intersection improvements, we're including up to 2.5 million. At this point, there's not a specific plan as to how that would be financed. It could be financed all or in part by the village. Could be done on a pay-as-you-go basis from benefiting landowners. So at this point, it's a placeholder to reserve funds again to potentially apply towards the cost of that project. And we've assigned estimated interest expense to that as well. One thing I'll address on the cash flow that I know came up as a question, but I'll just highlight it quickly here, is we had a question as to why the interest expense for these portions here seem so large relative to that for the intersection improvements, given these are all, in that $2.5 million range. And I'll touch on that in a moment when we look at the cash flow page. So all told, when we add in a little bit of administrative expense, we're at roughly $12 million. Really hard to see this one, but this is the excerpt of the development assumptions from the project plan. So again, we've looked at the areas that are most likely to see development within the proposed boundary, made certain assumptions as to the acres that would develop, and assigned an assumed value for each acre that develops, as well as the square footage that might be constructed on that acreage, and also assigned a value to that as well. When we look at it in total, it's roughly 67 million in projected build out over roughly the next 6 years. When we take that 64 million and we run that through the tax increment projection, we assume a nominal economic increase in the property value, a flat tax rate. We come up with roughly $20 million if the district were to remain open for its maximum 20-year life. And then on the cash flow, we've got that tax increment coming in. That is the primary revenue source for the district. And then the 3 columns reflecting liabilities, in addition to the administrative expense column, would be the repayment of those 2 PAYGOs. And then lastly, residual funds that could be potentially allocated to the Hogan 19 intersection. So if you look at these PAYGO obligations, and getting back to my earlier comment, you'll notice that the payments on the front end are quite small and they become larger over time. And what that is a function of how we've modeled this, which assumes that 75% of the tax increment generated by the development on these 2 respective landowners' parcels would be allocated to the PAYGO. So as that increment grows over time, we're able to make bigger payments. But what that means in the earlier years is that there's not a lot of money available to start buying down that principal. So we're accruing interest at a higher rate than we would if this was, for example, village financing. So with that combination of a slow amortization as well as a higher interest rate, It simply takes quite a bit longer and we accrue more interest paying off these pieces of obligations. The numbers in the Hogan intersection column are simply the residual 25%. And rather than this reflecting a specific debt amortization, again, this is just a stream of cash that is potentially available. And what I did is I stopped the amounts here when the present value of this stream of cash was equal to the 2.5 million that the village is estimating as the cost of that project. So based on these assumptions in this particular model, what this indicates is that the district would accumulate enough funds to close early and pay off the liabilities in the year 2039. In terms of the schedule, I already mentioned that the CDA is expected to consider this proposed district next week, Wednesday. If it were to be approved there, would potentially advance to the village board on November 6th. So as part of the meeting this evening, we'll be looking to potentially set a date sometime after the 6th of November to have this body reconvene. And I am happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you very much, Todd. What questions do we have?
With the Stotts plot there, do they have some undeveloped land in addition to their implement dealership? Is that what would generate the tax increment?
They do, as you can see on the screen, the north half is currently undeveloped, but the assumptions are based on essentially this whole site being redeveloped.
Okay, but you kind of broken it down between MGL and Stotts.
Mhm.
And so Stotts has the parcel between their implement dealership and Highway 19, the north side of their implement dealership.
So that, yeah, currently this parcel, the Stotts parcel is one whole parcel. And when anticipated Frank H goes through, that would obviously subdivide that parcel into a north half, south half. But just the way the land is used currently, the north half is farmed and vacant. But as it's our understanding that the whole site would be redeveloped.
Okay.
Both the north half, or well, the north half would be developed, the south half redeveloped.
Okay. And now Frank H Street, does that come up north or south of the dealership?
So that would be, so on the map, those three sort of colorful lines. So that would be roughly, it's a straight east-west alignment. And it was, so in answer to your question, it would be north of the dealership.
Okay, between them and the Highway 19. Okay. Okay, that's all I had.
Other questions? So closing in 2039 means we're closing 4 years early, roughly.
It's actually 6 years early.
6 years early.
Mhm.
My math is off.
It's because of that 2-year lag between when something's built and when you collect the tax increment.
Excellent. Wonderful. Wonderful. Other questions or comments? All right. And we don't take a vote on this. This just goes to the CDA. So, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda then, unless there are any other questions. All right, good. Next item on the agenda then is review annual, set next meeting to consider approval of tax increment district number 10. Correct? All right.
We have Thanksgiving the week of the 20th, so I think we would look at the week of the 13th or probably the week after, the week of the 27th, depending on people's availability.
Of November 27th or the week
Correct.
of November 13th? All right.
I would say the 13th with the week of the 27th as an alternate.
What does everyone's schedule look like?
When it comes to tax calculation, I prefer before Thanksgiving.
It might be easier. Yeah. But I don't know, what is everyone else's
Right.
schedule? Yeah.
Okay.
So the Thursday before Thanksgiving then? Or is there a preferred date that week? A better date?
I may be remote, but that's That's okay.
Would you like to do it on Monday before your board meeting? I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
board meeting. That's the second
Is that
Monday.
second Monday?
Let's do Monday then.
That would be the 20th for the board meeting.
Just
That's the week
Thanksgiving.
of Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Right. That is the budget night,
Okay, that might be a lot.
the budget adoption night.
Yeah.
Amongst probably other stuff.
Yeah.
Monday, the 13th would be a plan commission meeting.
And we start those at 5:30. Um,
27th, it
20.
doesn't matter.
okay. That Thursday before the first full Thursday before Thanksgiving, does that work or no?
16th.
16th, yeah.
What time are you thinking?
We've typically met at 6:30. Would there be better? Or is that
Um,
maybe not a good night?
I have a 5:30 appointment that night,
Okay.
but if we do earlier or a different day.
Scheduling is hard, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, so, all
The rest of the week works for me.
right. What do we have going on village-wise the rest of that week?
There may, but no, you're talking about the week of the 13th.
Yeah,
So the 14th may be a joint plan commission, unknown at this point. The 15th would not be a CDA
okay. That's a Wednesday.
that Wednesday.
What about the 15th? Would that work?
Works for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Todd, would that work for you?
Yes,
Yeah, all right.
time.
I don't know. What time do you guys want? Should we bump it up a half an hour? To get done a little earlier, 6 o'clock, would 6 o'clock be okay to start?
Sure.
All right. Put that in my calendar. And the next item on the agenda is, let me get my agenda back up. Sorry, here, the minute I move away from one screen, the other goes dark. All right, next item on the agenda is review the annual PE 300 reports and the performance and status of the cities or the village's active tax increments districts as required by Wisconsin State Statute 66 point, I think it's 1105. I don't have my reading glasses on. So on to you.
Well, thank you. So we've provided the body a copy of a full report, as we customarily do for each of the tax increment districts, and it includes the really exciting DORPE 300 form, which is statutorily what you're required to receive and review. But we know that that's really not that insightful since it's just a one-year snapshot. So again, as we do each year, we've updated the forward-looking cash flows. If you have questions about the full document, I'm certainly happy to field any questions, but we've done a brief presentation just to hit the highlights since we've got quite a number of districts. So we'll walk through that. I would invite both Tim and Renee to jump in and add any color commentary you might have about happenings in the district. I'll kind of focus on the financial performance. So we'll start with TID number 3, which we just showed on the prior map. This was the original Waunakee Business Park district. The expenditure period is well past, and the TID life was June 5th, 2023 as its end. So prior to that, the village board did adopt a resolution extending the term for a period of 1 year, as it's able to do for the purpose of providing funds for affordable housing. So 24 again will be the final year in terms of tax increment collection. We did see a $1.2 million increase in value year over year, and roughly a $332,000 increase in the district's fund balance at the end of 22 over 21. And on the cash flow on each of these, the blue bar represents the last audited fiscal year. And then we show the projections going forward through the end of the TID life. So a couple notes on TID number 3. So the incremental value that was certified as of the first of this year will result in one final round of tax increment collection that will be part of the 23 levy collected for 24's budget. That's this estimated $1.2 million. What we are projecting in terms of the use of those funds, and we've got an incentive payment here, but you'll see this large 1.9 million in other project costs. And there's two numbers embedded in that. So this particular district had an agreement where MLG provided a letter of credit that was drawn on in earlier years in order to pay village debt service when tax increment was not sufficient. The agreement provides for reimbursement for funds drawn on that letter of credit, which is estimated at 1.189 million. So that is the largest number in that 1.9. And then essentially the balance, whatever is left over after all other project costs are accounted for and paid, is the money that would be swept out then into the housing fund. And that's anticipated to be roughly 618,000. So this district, when it closes, will have a zero fund balance. So will not return any dollars to the individual taxing jurisdictions, because those remaining dollars will go again into that housing fund. The alternative would have been to collect for one more year after this, and then there would have been some residual. But the benefit here is this gets it back on the tax roll 1 year sooner for all of the jurisdictions. And I'll just pause at the end of each TID in case you have questions. And hearing none, we'll jump right into 4, which is the senior center site. So this district was created back in 2002. Expenditure period has got a little bit over a year left. It will end at the end of 2024. Lost a little bit of value year over year, and also the fund balance changed by about a negative 25,000, but still overall positive. Really no particular activity in this district. If you were to compare last year's cash flow projection with the one provided this year, we are expecting now that it will take the tax increment collected next year for 2024 to recover all project costs, instead of the tax increment collected in the current budget year being sufficient to accomplish that. And again, I should say with all of these, the village board has the ability to consider whether it would like to exercise that housing extension. So that is not assumed within any of these districts that we are looking at now. So what we are showing here is, again, that fund balance of roughly 127,000 at the end of 2022. We are expecting that when we get to 2024, we will have retired all project costs and be in a position to allow the district to close. So sometime prior to April 15th of next year, the village board could again consider either extending the district for a period of a year for housing, or terminating the district.
Can I just add one thing here? It's possible we might keep this open through the entire expenditure period, because we are still paying heirs for some monitoring of, there was some contamination found on the site that we've been remediating at the village center. So it is possible we might, I think the expenditure period goes through
the end of next year,
December.
Mhm.
So it is possible that this one, if we want to try and capture the maximum number of those costs, we would maybe keep it open through that entire expenditure period and then close it after that.
So that would be 2029 then?
No,
No,
the
oh.
expenditure period ends at the end of 2024,
Okay.
5 years before the end of the life of the district. So I know they're working with the engineer just to see how much monitoring is left on that, or if we could be nearly done with that, but that's a possibility.
Now we'll move to TID 5, which is the initial downtown district. This district had not much change in value, a slight loss, increased fund balance by about 275,000 over the prior year. This district has been operating previously with a negative fund balance, which improved from 21 to 22. And as we'll see on the cash flow in a moment, that will turn positive this year. No change in the projected closure date. And the end of the expenditure period for this district is November of 2026. So again, if we look at 2023, that cumulative balance, we are expecting that that ought to be positive. So this district will be in the black expected at the end of this year. We've identified the remaining obligations, which are debt service and development incentives, as well as the administrative expense. Assuming the projections and, no further significant expenditures, no significant changes in valuation, when we get to the year 2026, we would have accumulated enough fund balance to basically retire all of the remaining project debt in that year and to close the district, again, not assuming any extension for housing. And we'll talk about 8 in a minute, but would mention as part of TID 5 that number of the parcels in TID 5 have been overlaid by TID number 8. Number 6 on the south side is Kilkenny Farms TID. This district is a bit more, created in 2015, so its expenditure period runs out through 2030. Small loss in value year over year, no projected change in the closure year, which is 2027, and a uptick in the fund balance of roughly 430,000, 21 to 22. A few notes in terms of activity is the at-home senior living that was started last year will be completed or has been completed in 2023. Looks like you're getting a cigar lounge, Tim, next year. And tasting room, outstanding. And would also note that the village board has authorized us to run numbers and explore a potential territory amendment that would include property to the west shown off the map here. So that's not ready to come to this body yet, but it is something that we are presently working on, and you may be asked to meet on in the relatively near future. Cash flow, this district has, significant fund balance, so it's in a great position, 1.7 million in 2022. There is debt service obligations, but the amount of tax increment that is presently being generated is far in excess of that annual debt service payment. So we are adding, in that $500,000 range to the fund balance each of the next several years. And again, there's the potential for the amendment I just mentioned, but on a strict status quo standpoint, when we get to the year 2027, we would have enough money in the fund balance to retire the roughly $4.3 million in village debt that would be outstanding in that year. TID 7 in the business park. This is a small single business tax increment district for Renew Air, created in 2016. Small increase in value of roughly 310,000 since last year, and an increase in fund balance of roughly 56,000. We are continuing to project that this district will close in 2030. The project, was completed, so really nothing will change in this district other than continued payments on the incentive, which is shown on the cash flow. And what the projection indicates is that by the year 2030, we would have accumulated enough revenue, because we don't pay out the entire tax increment on an annual basis as part of the incentive, that if the village wished, it could take those accumulated funds and basically pay off the projected remaining payments and close the district early. So this is the newer downtown district, which overlays in part TID number 5. Created in 2018, so has an expenditure period that runs all the way out to the year 2040. Present projections indicate that we will close in 2037. Similar to the other districts, not a lot of change in value, 22 to 23, a small decrease, and we had a small increase in the fund balance. By way of activity, the mill just down the street was completed earlier this year. And then in the lower level of that structure is Grace Coffee, which is again underway or done.
Quick update. Yeah, that actually opened in July, Grace Coffee. And the basement level of that is home to a company called Opro's Fishing.
Okay. Primary obligations for this district, there is a small amount of village debt, but then the development incentives that are associated with the Lamp House project. So similar to the Renew Air TID, we would have the ability from accumulated funds to pay off early the balance of that incentive payment, which would be projected potentially for 2037. And again, this district fairly early in its life, so certainly possibility for additional redevelopment, additional project costs. So as we're getting to these newer TIDs, a lot longer future life for things to potentially happen. TID 9, which we're all very familiar with, and I would mention that this was prepared prior to your approval of the amendment very recently. So this does not include the newcomer project. So based on the status quo scenario, and again, what this would reflect is the completion of the Octopi facilities, the brewery and the warehouse expansions. And that is captured in that $13.7 million increase in value, 22 to 23. We could close the district in 2033, which is 3 years later than the analysis that we prepared last year. And the primary driver of that is simply that the final values of the facilities came in less than we had originally forecasted. But overall, the district has a small negative fund balance and has an expenditure period which will run through the end of 2033. And that indicates a projected closure and an early payoff of those incentives in the year. Again, 2033, there is no village debt involved in this district. And based on the newcomer being layered on, effectively, that doesn't really change the projected closure date, since it's the increment coming from that project that goes to pay the incentive on that particular development, which will in turn then be repaid post-TID closure. And I am happy to answer questions you might have on any of the TIDs, or Tim or Renee have anything to add? And this is informational, but just so the village has something it can show its auditor to prove that we held the meeting, we do have a resolution just saying that you met and received the reports.
All right, so we're in good shape. That's the headline.
Yeah, in fact, as you know, we had the call with Moody's just a few weeks ago, and I think that was one of the storylines that the analyst mentioned, is they were happy to see that, the TIDs that had been operating in a deficit position are all either now or very close to being, like I said, in the black. So that's, I think a great news story, and you're absolutely correct. Overall, the village's TIF program is operating very well.
Excellent. So I think there's a big thank you in that to everyone that works on the TIDs and the TIFs and keeps us on the right track. This is a big job. It's a big job that occurs over many, many years to keep us afloat and going in the right direction. So thank you all for the hard work. So do we have a recommended language for the resolution? And before that, does anyone else have questions or comments or things that they'd like to share? No? All right.
I think you could just move the title of the resolution
All
as
right.
it appears on the agenda.
All right, so I make a motion that we approve a resolution acknowledging the filing of the annual reports in compliance with the annual meeting requirement.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. And then we have one more item on the agenda. Adjourn, yeah. Somebody's got to make a motion though. Yeah. All right.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No one's opposed. Motion carries. Thank you guys very much for all the hard work. This is sure a happy meeting for sure. So.
Yeah.